Okay, so let's see. So you're in the avocado chapter, and you read a little bit with Mr. Squatrito on Thursday. Okay. Mama, so she's visiting her mama in the hospital. Good morning, Kale.
Good morning.
Mama nodded, her eyelids slowly falling back down as if it had been a burden to keep them up. Esperanza felt Miguel's hand on her shoulder. Anza, we should go, he said. But Esperanza would not move. She wanted to do something for Mama to make her feel better. She noticed the brush and hairpins on the bedside table. She carefully rolled Mama on her side and gathered all of her hair together. She brushed it and plaited it in a long braid. Wrapping it around Mama's head, she gently pinned it into place. Then she helped Mama lie on her back, her hair now framing her face against the white linens like a braided halo, like she used to wear it in Aguas Calientes. Esperanza bent down close to Mama's ear. Don't worry, Mama. Remember, I will take care of everything. I'm working and I can pay the bills. I love you. Mama said softly, I love you too. And as Esperanza turned to leave, she heard Mama whisper, no matter what happens. What, Luis?
What? How could you pay the bills?
Because she's working, so she's getting...
But she's a little girl.
I know. Well, remember, this was about 100 years ago. Okay.
Wait, it's based on real life?
Remember, this is like a lot of it's like realistic fiction. Like some of it could happen in real life, and some of it did, including children working. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so she's working, she's making money in order to pay the bills so her mama can be in the hospital, and she's just, praying that her mama's going to get well. You need to get away from the camp, Esperanza, said Hortensia as she handed her the grocery list and asked her to go to the market with Miguel. It's the first of spring and it's beautiful outside. I thought you and Josefina always look forward to marketing on Saturday, said Esperanza. We do, but today we are helping Melina and Irene make enchiladas. Could you go for us? Esperanza knew they were trying to keep her occupied. Mama had been in the hospital for 3 months, and Esperanza hadn't been allowed to visit for several weeks. Since then, Esperanza hadn't been acting like herself. She went through the motions of living. Amy, don't. She was polite enough and answered everyone's questions with the simplest answers, but she was tormented by Mama's absence. Papa, Abuelita, Mama, who would be next? She crawled into bed as early as possible each night, curling her body into a tight ball, and didn't move until morning because they're tight. She knew Josefina and Hortensia were worried about her. She nodded to Hortensia, took the list, and went to find Miguel. Be sure to tell Miguel to go to Mr. Yakota's market, Hortensia called for her. Hortensia had been right about the weather. The fog and the grayness had gone. The valley air was crisp and clean from recent rains. They drove along the fields of tall, feathery asparagus plants that she would soon be packing. Citrus groves displayed their leftover fruit like decorations on Christmas trees. And even though it was still cool, there was an expectancy that Esperanza could smell, a rich, loamy odor that promised spring. Miguel, why must we always drive so far to shop at the Japanese market when there are other stores closer to Arvin? Some of the other market owners aren't kind to Mexicans, as Mr. Yakota, said Miguel. He stocks many of the things he needs, and he treats us like people. What do you mean? Esperanza, people here think that all Mexicans are alike. They think they're all undereducated, dirty, poor, and unskilled. It does not occur to them that many have been trained in professions in Mexico. Esperanza looked down at her clothes. She wore a shirtwaist dress that used to be Mama's, and before that, someone else's. Over the dress was a man's sweater with several buttons missing, which was also too big. She leaned up and looked into the mirror. Her face was tan from weeks in the field, and she'd taken to wearing her hair in a long braid like Hortensia's because Mama had been right. It was more practical that way. Miguel, how could anyone look at me and think I was uneducated? She smiled at her joke. The fact remains, Esperanza, that you, for instance, have a better education than most people's children in this country. But no one is likely to recognize that or take time to learn it. Americans see us as one big brown group who are good for only manual labor. At this market, no one stares at us or treats us like outsiders or calls us dirty greasers. My father says that Mr. Yakota is a very smart businessman. He's getting rich on other people's bad manners. Miguel's explanation was familiar. Esperanza's contact with Americans outside the camp had been limited to doctors and nurses at the hospital, but she'd heard stories from others about how they were treated. There were special sections at the movie theaters for blacks and for Mexicans. In town, parents did not want their children going to the same school with Mexicans. Living away from town in the company camp had its advantages, she decided. The children all went to school together, white, Mexican, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino. It didn't matter to anyone because they were all poor. Sometimes she felt as if she lived in a cocoon, protected from much of the indignation. Miguel pulled the truck into the parking lot at the market. I'll meet you. I'm going to talk about railroad jobs that these men gathered on the corner. Esperanza went in. Mr. Yokota was from Tokyo, and the store had all sorts of Japanese cooking ingredients like seaweed and ginger and fresh fish counter with fish that still had their heads. But there was Mexican products too, like masa de harina for tamales, chiles for salsa, and big bags of dried beans for frijoles. There were even cow intestines in the meat case for menudo, and other specialties like chorizo and pig's feet. Esperanza's favorite part of the store was the ceiling that was crowded with a peculiar combination of Japanese paper lanterns and piñatas shaped like stars and donkeys. There was a small tissue donkey that Esperanza hadn't noticed before. It was like the one that Mama had bought for her years ago. Esperanza thought it was so cute she'd refuse to break it, even though it had been filled with sweets. Instead, she'd hung it in her room above her bed. A clerk walked by her, and impulsively she pointed to the miniature piñata. Por favor, she said, please. She bought the other things they needed, including another money order. That was one more benefit of Mr. Yokota's market. She could buy money orders there. She was waiting in the truck when Miguel came back. Another money order? What do you do with them all? Asked Miguel. I save them in my valise. They're for such small amounts, but together they'll be enough to someday bring Abuelita here. And the piñata? It's not anyone's birthday. I bought it for Mama. I'm going to ask the nurses to put it near her bed, so she'll know that I'm thinking of her. We can stop by the hospital on the way back. Will you cut a hole in the top for me so I can put caramels inside? The nurses can eat them. He took out his pocket knife and made an opening in the piñata. While Miguel drove, Esperanza began feeding in the caramels. Not far from the main road, they approached an almond grove, the trees flush with gray-green leaves and white blossoms. Esperanza noticed a girl and a woman walking hand in hand, each with a grocery bag on their other arm. She couldn't help but think what a nice scene it made, with the two women framed against so many spring blossoms. Esperanza recognized one of them. I think that's Martha. Miguel stopped the truck, then slowly backed up. We should give her a ride. Esperanza reluctantly nodded, remembering the last time they'd given her a lift, but she opened the door. What?
In a movie called Beagle, and when like Beagle, his friend gets like a letter, he says it's from Martha
Mm-hmm.
in the movie, and Beagle says, "Who's Martha?"
Okay, all right. So that's a little off topic, right? Like you're thinking about similar names, but not quite. Hello? No, I think he's over in the elementary like workroom thing testing. Okay. Esperanza and Miguel. Que buena suerte. Well, good luck, said Marta. This is my mother, Ada. Thanks for the ride, or Ada. Marta's mother had the same short, curly black hair, but hers was sprinkled with gray. Miguel got out and put all the groceries in the truck bed so they could sit in the front. Ada said, I heard about your mother and I've been praying for her. Esperanza was surprised and touched. Thank you. I'm grateful. Are you coming to our camp? Asked Miguel. No, said Martha. As you probably know, I'm not welcome there. We're going a mile or so up the road to the strikers' farm. We were tossed out of the migrant workers camp and were told either to go back to work or to leave, so we left. We aren't going to work under those disgusting conditions and for those pitiful wages. Ada was quiet and nodded when Martha talked about the strike. Esperanza felt a twinge of envy when she noticed that Martha never let go of her mother's hand. There are hundreds of us together at this farm, but thousands around the country, and more people join our cause each day. You are new here, but in time you'll understand what we're trying to change. Turn left, she said, pointing to the dirt road rutted with tire marks. Miguel turned down the path bordered in cotton fields. Finally, they reached several acres of land surrounded by chain link fencing and barbed wire. Its single opening guarded by several men wearing armbands. Aquí, right here, said Ada. What are the guards for? Asked Esperanza. They're for protection, said Marta. The farmer who owns the land is sympathetic to us, but a lot of people don't like the strikers causing trouble. We've had threats. The men take turns at the entrance. Miguel pulled the truck to the side of the road and stopped. There were only 10 wooden toilet stalls for hundreds of people, and Esperanza could smell the effects from the truck. Some people lived in tents, but others had only burlap bags stretched between poles. Some were living in their cars or old trucks. Mattresses were on the ground where people and dogs rested. A goat was tied to a tree. There was a long pipe that lay on top of the ground and a line of water spigots sticking up from it. Near each spigot were pots and pans and campfire rings, the makings of an outdoor kitchen. Hello? Yes. Yes. All right, thank you. Bye. Oh, wait, and Kale just showed up as virtual. Is he out for virtual stuff? Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, no, like he came up in my virtual classroom. Yes, but he's not marked as virtual. Does that make sense? Like, so he's on my meeting, but he's not marked as virtual on the computer. So yes, I guess. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Near each spigot were pots and pans and campfire rings, the making of outdoor kitchens. In an irrigation ditch, women were washing clothes and children were bathing at the same time. Clotheslines ran everywhere. It was a great jumble of humanity and confusion. Okay, are you guys imagining that in your head? So people aren't, like, they don't have homes in this camp. These are the strikers, the people that are trying to stand up for better working conditions. They don't have houses like in the other camp. They're kind of camping. Some of them have tents. Some of them don't. Some of them just have like bags that they're kind of hanging up, cloth bags that they're hanging up to try to give them some shade. it's just kind of crazy. They have 10 toilets for like hundreds of people living there. So when she said she could smell the she said, yeah, the effects of that. She could smell the effects of that, right? And so that, what do you think that smelled like? Can you imagine? Right? Yeah, that's what. Ugh. Okay, so does this camp sound like a very nice place to live?
No.
Okay. They're washing their clothes in a ditch right now that has water, just an irrigation ditch. Okay, so that's water that usually goes out to the fields to help water the plants. So do you think it's the cleanest water? No, and the kids are running through it and bathing at the same time that people are trying to wash clothes. What?
I had to use it and my dad told me to not try to not fall in.
Yeah, like they've got irrigation ditches up in.
No, like the porta potty.
Oh, the porta potties. Well, yeah. Definitely don't fall into a porta potty. That would not be pleasant. Okay.
That was very disgusting.
Right. So are you guys picturing that in your head now? Like that this is not a very good place to live, but the people are living there because they think that what they're doing is important. About standing up for better money, better living conditions, better everything for the people that are working in the camps. Hale, are you shaking your head like you don't agree, or are you shaking your head like you, or? Yeah.
I disagree.
You disagree that it's not worth it, or you disagree that, like, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
What you just said.
You disagree, like that it's not worth it for them
Mm-hmm.
to do that? Okay. Okay, so we're going to continue reading for just a couple more minutes and then we got to get going, but we're almost done with this chapter, so why the heck not finish it? Because it's so exciting. We're figuring out, why do they do this, right? Why do these people think that this is important? Amy, please don't tear that up all over. We'll put that back on my desk if you put your name on it. Okay. Esperanza could not stop looking. She felt hypnotized by the squalor. Now, does squalor sound like it means something nice? No.
What is that?
Kind of like by the grossness, by the filth, by the what just looked really sad and poor and miserable, kind of. But Martha and her mother did not seem the least bit embarrassed. "Home sweet home," said Martha. They all climbed out of the truck, but before Martha and Ada could retrieve their groceries, a campesino family came from the opposite direction, approached them. The children were dirty and skinny, and the mother held an infant who was crying. "Do you have food so I can feed my family?" asked the father. "We were thrown out of our camp because I was striking. My family has not eaten in 2 days. There are too many people coming into the valley each day who will work for pennies. Yesterday, I worked all day and made less than 50 cents, and I cannot buy food for 1 day with that. I was hoping that here, with others who've been through the same." "You are welcome here," said Ada. Esperanza reached into the truck bed and opened the large bag of beans. "Hand me your hat, senor." The man handed over his large sun hat, and she filled it with dried beans, then gave it back to him. "Gracias, gracias," he said. Esperanza looked at the 2 older children, their eyes watery and vacant. She lifted the piñata and held it out to them. They said nothing but hurried towards her, took it, and ran back to their family. Martha looked at her. "Are you sure you aren't already on our side?" Esperanza shook her head. "They were hungry, that's all. Even if I believed in what you're doing, I must take care of my mother." Ada put her hand on Esperanza's arm and smiled. "We all do what we have to do. Your mother would be proud of you." Miguel handed them their bags, and they walked towards the farmer's field, but Before they reached the gate, Martha suddenly turned and said, I shouldn't be telling you this, but the strikers are more organized than they appear. In a few weeks, during asparagus, things are going to happen all over the country. We're going to shut down everything, the fields, the sheds, the railroad. If you've not joined us by then, be careful. Then she hurried to catch up with her mother. As Miguel and Esperanza rode back to Arvin, neither of them said a word for many miles. Marta's threat and the guilt of having a job weighed heavily on Esperanza's mind. Do you think they're right? She asked. I don't know, said Miguel. What the man said is true. I've heard that there will be 10 times the people looking for jobs for the next few months. From Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and other places too. And that they are poor people like us who need to feed their families too. If so many come and are willing to work for pennies, what will happen to us? But until then, with so many joining the strike, I might be able to get a job at the railroad. Esperanza's mind wrestled with Miguel's words. For him, the strike was an opportunity to work at a job he loved and make it in this country. For her, it was a threat to her finances, Abuelita's arrival, and Mama's recuperation. Then there was the matter of her own safety. She thought of Mama and Abuelita, and she knew there was only one thing for her to do. Esperanza steadied her hands. A few nights later, she walked towards the cabin and hoped Hortensia had a few more avocados. It was later than usual. She'd been weeding asparagus in a farm field, so she'd been on the last truck. When she arrived at the cabin, everyone was crowded around the small table. There were fresh tortillas on a plate, and Hortensia was stirring upon a pan of machaca, scrambled eggs with shredded meat, onions, and peppers. It was Miguel's favorite, but they usually ate it for breakfast. What's the occasion? Asked Esperanza. I got a job in the machine shop at the railroad. Oh, Miguel, that's good news. So many railroad workers have joined the strikers. I know it might be temporary, but if I do a good job, maybe they will keep me. That's right, said Alfonso. You do good work. They will see it. They will keep you. Esperanza sat down and listened to Miguel tell the others about the job, but she wasn't hearing his words. She was seeing his eyes dancing like Papa's when he used to talk about the land. She watched Miguel's animated face, thinking that at last his dream was coming true. And you don't intentionally annoy your neighbors.